The grand halls of the Galactic High Council gleamed with vibrant hues of swirling starlight, reflecting the unity of countless star systems. Among the representatives stood Commander Ethan Blake, a distinguished Earth diplomat, dressed in the ceremonial blue and gold of his people. His heart pounded with the weight of the decision he was about to make, a decision that would shock every corner of the galaxy. The whispers had already begun. Blake was set to marry Princess Zevra, the least admired daughter of the Arcarian royal family. Known for her ghastly appearance, she was often shunned even by her own kind. Princess Zevra was unlike any of her radiant, ethereal sisters. While the Arcarians were known for their elegance, with smooth crystalline skin and glowing eyes that shimmered like suns, Zevra was different. Her skin was rough, her face sharp and contorted, and her eyes, instead of gleaming with celestial light, were sunken and dark. Many considered her the epitome of unattractiveness. Despite this, Blake had made his choice, one that left the galaxy reeling in disbelief. Blake had met Zevra during negotiations between Earth and the Arcarian Empire. As a representative, he was tasked with forging peaceful relations. In his many discussions with Zevra, Blake discovered a brilliant, compassionate mind hidden beneath the surface. She wasn't the vain, shallow figure others saw her as. Zevra's intelligence, wit, and unwavering resolve captivated him more than her appearance ever could. She understood intergalactic politics in ways that even her esteemed siblings could not. Blake, a man of reason and heart, saw past the superficial and into the core of her spirit. What she lacked in beauty, she more than made up for in wisdom and integrity. When Blake declared his intent to marry Zevra in front of the Arcarian royal court, the reaction was immediate. Gasps, murmurs, and even laughter filled the hall. The ruling council, a body known for its intense pride in aesthetics, was stunned. To them, the idea of a human, a species known for their physicality, choosing the most unconventional of Arcarian royalty was unthinkable. Yet Blake stood firm. He wasn't interested in politics or status. He admired Zevra for who she truly was, and he wanted to spend his life with her. The court's shock was palpable, but none were more affected than Zevra herself. She had long come to terms with her position as the outcast of the royal family. To hear a proposal, especially from someone as revered as Blake, was unfathomable. Her sharp features, usually set in a mask of calm, broke into an expression of disbelief. Her dark eyes locked onto Blake's, searching for any sign of deceit. But there was none. His proposal was genuine. Zevra's voice trembled as she responded, "Why? Why would you choose me when there are so many others more worthy?" Blake smiled, his voice soft but resolute. "Because you are more than what they see. Your wisdom, your strength, your heart. That is what I see, and that is what I choose." For the first time in many years, a smile crept across Zevra's face. It wasn't the radiant smile of her sisters, but it was real, and for Blake, it was the most beautiful thing in the galaxy. The court buzzed with disbelief, but King Jerix, the patriarch of the Arcarian family, rose from his throne, silencing the murmurs. His eyes, glowing with the light of 1,000 stars, bore down on Blake. "You realize, human, what you are asking?" King Jerix's voice echoed through the hall, commanding silence. "Marrying into this family means more than you can imagine. Zevra is not like my other daughters. She has suffered much, and the court has not been kind to her. Do you truly believe you can withstand the burden of what this union will bring?" Blake nodded, unwavering. "I understand the challenges, Your Majesty, but I am not marrying Zevra for approval or politics. I'm marrying her because I see her for who she truly is, and that is all that matters." The king's intense gaze softened ever so slightly, and after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke. "Very well, you have my blessing. But know this, Commander Blake, this marriage will change everything, and not just for you." As the king's words echoed through the hall, Blake could feel the weight of the galaxy's expectations settle on his shoulders. But in his heart, he knew he had made the right choice. The marriage, however unconventional, was a symbol of something greater, the breaking of old traditions, the embracing of true connection over superficiality. The days that followed were filled with preparations. The wedding of a human and an Arcarian princess was unprecedented. News spread across the galaxy, with many still doubting Blake's choice. Zevra's sisters, especially the eldest Princess Lyra, openly ridiculed the union. Lyra, with her flawless crystalline beauty, sneered at every opportunity, making it clear she believed Blake was making a grave mistake. Despite the mockery and the skepticism, Blake and Zevra grew closer. In their private moments, they discussed the future of their worlds and their place in it. Zevra, once quiet and reserved, began to open up, revealing a side of herself that few had ever seen. Her mind, sharp as ever, was now complemented by a growing confidence. Blake saw her blossoming into the leader he always knew she could be. But as the wedding day approached, tensions in the court grew. The galaxy watched with bated breath, wondering what would happen when the human married the galaxy's most unlikely princess. What they didn't realize was that this union would not only change the course of two lives, but the very fate of the stars themselves. The day of the wedding arrived, and the Arcarian royal palace was a sight to behold. Its crystalline towers shimmered under the light of distant stars, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the surrounding lands. The palace buzzed with activity as dignitaries from across the galaxy gathered to witness the union of Commander Blake and Princess Zevra. The tension in the air was palpable. Many still whispered in disbelief about the audacity of a human marrying the least admired of Arcarian royalty. Yet others were curious. Perhaps this unprecedented union was a sign of the galaxy changing in ways no one had foreseen. Blake stood at the entrance of the grand ceremonial hall, his heart steady despite the murmurs that followed him. His formal attire, woven with the threads of Earth's history and legacy, seemed a stark contrast to the ethereal beauty of the Arcarians, whose garments reflected the colors of nebulae and galaxies. But Blake's thoughts were not on appearances. His mind was focused on Zevra, the woman who had captured his heart in ways he never expected. The hall, vast and adorned with shimmering banners of starlight, was filled with representatives from countless systems. Each faction had come to witness the spectacle, but also to judge. As Blake stepped forward, his gaze briefly met the cold stare of Princess Lyra, Zevra's eldest sister. Her disdain was unmistakable, her crystalline features twisted in contempt. To Lyra, this wedding was a farce, a blight on their royal bloodline. But Blake paid her no mind. His thoughts returned to Zevra. At the far end of the hall, the grand doors slowly opened, and there she was, Princess Zevra, clad in a gown of deep silver that shimmered like the stars, walked forward with a quiet grace that surprised many. Her rough skin, often the subject of mockery, now glistened under the soft light, revealing a beauty that was different but undeniable. She moved with confidence, her head held high, her eyes no longer downcast in shame but shining with purpose. Blake's breath caught in his throat as she approached. In that moment, he knew beyond a doubt that his choice was right. Zevra wasn't the outcast everyone believed her to be. She was a force, a hidden star that had yet to reveal its full brilliance. The ceremony began with the elders of Arcar, the ancient priests of the royal house, reciting the verses of unity between the stars and their people. Each word echoed through the hall, weaving together the destinies of two souls from different worlds. As the ceremony progressed, the crowd remained mostly silent, save for a few whispers of disbelief. This union defied tradition in every sense. No one had expected it, and many didn't understand it. But those closest to Blake and Zevra saw the truth. They saw the way they looked at each other, the silent connection, the understanding that went beyond words. It was clear that their bond was not one of convenience or politics, but something deeper, something far more powerful than anyone had anticipated. As the final blessing was spoken, the elders raised their hands, and the ceiling of the hall began to part, revealing the vast, star-filled sky above. Starlight flooded the room, illuminating the couple at the altar. It was a moment of pure awe, a symbol of the union between Earth and Arkar, between two worlds so different yet now bound together. Blake turned to Zevra, taking her hands in his. "Are you ready?" he whispered, his voice steady. Zevra's eyes, once shadowed by doubt, now gleamed with a quiet strength. "I am," she replied softly, her voice resolute. The moment had come. With the galaxy as their witness, they exchanged vows, pledging not only to one another but to the future of their people. Blake promised to stand by her side, not as a diplomat or a representative of Earth, but as her partner, her equal. Zevra, in turn, vowed to lead with wisdom, to embrace her newfound role with the same strength and intellect that had captivated Blake from the start. As the ceremony drew to a close, there was a stunned silence throughout the hall. No one had expected such an emotional, genuine moment between the two. Even Princess Lyra, despite her initial scorn, could not hide her surprise. But just as the quiet lingered, a sudden burst of light erupted from the sky above. Gasps filled the hall as the stars themselves seemed to shift and dance. It was a phenomenon no one had ever seen before, a cosmic reaction to the union of Blake and Zevra. The stars, once static, now moved in harmony, forming constellations that hadn't been visible in centuries. The elders exchanged astonished glances, and King Jerix, seated on his towering throne, rose to his feet. His glowing eyes widened as he realized the significance of what was happening. The stars were responding to the marriage, a sign that this union was far more than anyone had predicted. Blake and Zevra, standing together at the center of the hall, looked up in wonder. The galaxy itself seemed to be blessing their marriage, a cosmic affirmation that their love, though unconventional, was destined to change the stars themselves. As the light of the stars bathed them in its glow, Blake turned to Zevra, his heart swelling with emotion. "It's just the beginning," he whispered, squeezing her hand. Zevra smiled, a smile that to Blake was more radiant than all the stars in the galaxy. "Yes," she agreed, her voice filled with hope. "Just the beginning." And with that, the galaxy's most unlikely marriage was sealed, not only in the eyes of their people but in the very fabric of the universe itself. What would follow in the days and years to come was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: this union had the power to reshape the destiny of their worlds. The galaxy would never be the same again. The celebration that followed the wedding was subdued, a reflection of the uncertain and tumultuous reactions throughout the galaxy. While Blake and Zevra shared quiet moments of joy, the corridors of the Arkarian royal palace were alive with hushed conversations, speculations, and unrest. For many, the union was a symbol of hope, a sign that perhaps the galaxy could move beyond old prejudices and rigid traditions. But for others, it was a challenge to everything they had known. As Blake and Zevra stood together on one of the grand balconies overlooking the shimmering city below, they could sense the weight of those conflicting emotions bearing down on them. The stars that had once blessed their union now felt distant and cold, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would come next. "You've stirred the pot more than you know," came a voice from behind them. Blake and Zevra turned to see Prince Xerion, Zevra's older brother and the crown prince of Arkar, standing with his arms folded across his chest. His face, though strikingly handsome in the Arkarian way, bore no hint of joy. There was no malice, but a quiet resignation in his expression, as if he had already foreseen the storm on the horizon. "I'm aware," Blake replied, his voice calm but firm. "But this was never about politics or appearances." Xerion nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing as he studied his new brother-in-law. "Perhaps not, but you've made a statement to the galaxy whether you intended to or not. There are those who will welcome this, and there are those who will see it as an affront to everything we stand for." Zevra, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "I'm used to being an affront, Xerion," she said, her tone carrying a quiet strength. "What they think of me doesn't matter. What matters is what comes next." Xerion's expression softened as he regarded his sister, You've always been stronger than they gave you credit for, Zevra. But strength alone won't protect you from what's coming. Blake frowned, sensing a deeper meaning behind the prince's words. What do you mean? Zarian hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to speak openly. Then, with a sigh, he stepped closer. There are factions within the royal court, within the galaxy, even, that have long sought to destabilize the balance of power. Your marriage to Zevra has given them an excuse to act. They see this union as a threat to their control, to the way things have always been. Blake and Zevra exchanged a glance, the gravity of Zarian's warning sinking in. So, they're using us as a catalyst, Zevra murmured, her mind already racing with possibilities. But who? And what do they want? Zarian's gaze darkened. There are whispers of an alliance forming, a shadow coalition that seeks to overthrow the Galactic High Council. They want to upend the current order and create a new regime, one that doesn't adhere to the principles of unity and peace, and they're watching you closely, waiting for the right moment to strike. Blake clenched his fists, the diplomat in him bristling at the thought of war and chaos. They'll use our marriage as an excuse to fracture the galaxy. Yes, Zarian confirmed. They'll paint it as the beginning of Earth's attempt to infiltrate the Arcarian royal bloodline, to gain power through unconventional means. It doesn't matter that your intentions are pure. Perception, as always, will drive their actions. Zevra's sharp eyes gleamed with determination. We need to act first. We can't let them control the narrative. Blake nodded in agreement. But how? If this alliance is operating in the shadows, we can't strike without more information. Zarian looked thoughtful for a moment before speaking again. There is someone who might be able to help. A former advisor to the High Council, now living in exile. He knows the inner workings of the Council better than anyone, and he's well versed in the political games these factions play. Why is he in exile? Blake asked warily. He was accused of treason, Zarian replied. But the truth is far more complicated. Some say he was framed. Others claim he truly did conspire against the Council. Either way, he holds the key to understanding the forces at work here. Zevra's eyes narrowed. What's his name? Velkor Jaris, Zarian said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of both respect and caution. He resides on the outer rim of the galaxy, on a desolate moon in the Rithis system. Few know his whereabouts, but I can arrange a way for you to meet him. Blake's mind raced as he processed the new information. Velkor Jaris was a name that carried both fear and intrigue. If they could convince him to help, they might gain the advantage they needed to prevent a galactic war. But there was risk. Jaris was a dangerous figure, one who had danced too close to power and had been burned for it. We'll go, Zevra said firmly, surprising both her brother and Blake with her decisiveness. If there's a chance he can help us stop this before it begins, we can't afford to waste time. Zarian gave her a long, measured look before nodding. Very well. I'll arrange for transport under the radar. But be careful, Zevra. Jaris plays his own games, and you may not like the price he demands. With that, Zarian turned and left them alone on the balcony, his words lingering in the cool night air like a distant echo of the storm to come. Blake turned to Zevra, his brow furrowed with concern. Are you sure about this? Velkor Jaris is not someone to be taken lightly. Zevra met his gaze with a steady resolve. I'm sure. We have to do this, Blake. For us, for our people, for the galaxy. We can't let them win. Blake nodded slowly, taking her hand in his. Then we'll face whatever comes together. As they stood there, side by side beneath the vast, shimmering sky, they knew that their journey had only just begun. The union that had shaken the galaxy was now the spark that could ignite a firestorm, one that could either bring about lasting peace or plunge the stars into chaos. And as the shadows of conspiracy and war began to stir, Blake and Zevra prepared to meet the rising storm head-on. The journey to the Rithis system was long and fraught with danger. Blake and Zevra traveled under the guise of merchant traders, aboard a small, nondescript freighter provided by Xerion. The crew, handpicked by the prince himself, consisted of trusted mercenaries and seasoned spacers, each sworn to secrecy. They moved swiftly, navigating through uncharted regions of space to avoid detection by hostile eyes. The galaxy was on high alert after their wedding, and they couldn't afford to draw attention. Zevra stood in the freighter's observation deck, watching the swirling gases of a nearby nebula through the viewport. The colors, vibrant and chaotic, mirrored her emotions. As much as she believed in their cause, doubt gnawed at her. Could they truly stop the rising tide of dissent and rebellion? Or were they walking straight into a trap? Blake approached her from behind, sensing her unease. He placed a hand on her shoulder, offering silent comfort. "Velcor Jerris," Zevra murmured. "What do you know of him?" Blake paused, choosing his words carefully. He was once a brilliant strategist and advisor to the Galactic High Council. His influence was immense, some say too immense. When rumors of his treason surfaced, the council acted swiftly to exile him. But there were always whispers that the charges were fabricated. No one really knows the truth. Zevra turned to face him, her dark eyes filled with determination. "Do you trust him?" Blake hesitated. "I trust that he knows more about the inner workings of the council and its enemies than anyone else. But trust him? I don't know. He's dangerous, and his motives are his own." Zevra nodded, her mind already focused on the task ahead. "Then we'll have to be careful. If he's our only lead, we have no choice." As they neared the Rithis system, the freighter's crew grew tense. The system was notorious for its isolation, its rocky moons inhabited by outcasts, smugglers, and those who preferred to live far from the prying eyes of the Galactic High Council. Velcor Jerris had chosen his exile well. The moon where Jerris resided, Rithis Prime, was a barren, hostile place. Its surface was scarred with deep craters, remnants of long-forgotten battles. As the freighter descended through its thick, ash-laden atmosphere, Blake could see the remains of ancient warships scattered across the landscape, their twisted hulks a testament to the moon's violent history. The landing was rough, the ship jolting as it settled on the uneven terrain. The air outside was thin, barely breathable, and carried the acrid scent of sulfur. Blake and Zevra, donning protective suits, disembarked with a small team, their steps echoing in the eerie silence. At the edge of the landing zone stood a single, towering structure, an old military bunker repurposed into Jerris's stronghold. The entrance was guarded by two towering droids, their rusted armor a sign of age, but still deadly. "This is it," Blake said under his breath as they approached. The droids scanned them silently before allowing the group inside. The air within the bunker was cold and stale, lit only by flickering overhead lights. It was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the Galactic High Council chambers or the Arcarian Royal Palace. Here, practicality reigned over luxury. They were led down a long corridor until they reached a vast, circular chamber. At its center sat Velcor Jerris. He was older than Blake expected, though his eyes were as sharp as ever, gleaming with intelligence and a hint of malice. His skin, weathered and lined, spoke of years spent in exile, but his posture remained regal. He sat in a simple chair, surrounded by a collection of ancient books, datapads, and holographic maps of the galaxy. His appearance was disheveled, but there was an undeniable air of authority about him. "Commander Blake," Jerris said, his voice smooth and measured, with a hint of amusement, "and Princess Zevra of Arcar. To what do I owe the honor of this unexpected visit?" Blake stepped forward, his expression neutral but respectful. "We need your help." Jerris's eyes flickered with curiosity. "Help? From a man the galaxy considers a traitor?" Zevra crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "We're not concerned with your reputation, Velcor. We need information about the factions conspiring against the Council. They're using our marriage as a pretext to destabilize the galaxy, and we need to stop them." For a moment, Jerris said nothing, simply watching the pair with an inscrutable expression. Then he chuckled softly. "Ah, yes. Your marriage. The scandal of the century. A human diplomat marrying the least adored of the Arcarian princesses. How very bold of you, Commander." Zevra's eyes narrowed, but she held her tongue. Blake, sensing the tension, stepped in. "We didn't come here to be insulted, Jarrus. We came because we know you have valuable information. You've seen the inner workings of the Council, the power plays, the factions that operate behind the scenes. We need to know who's pulling the strings." Jarrus leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling as he considered their request. "And what makes you think I would help you?" Zevra took a step forward, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "Because you've been cast aside by the very people you served. They took your power, your influence, and left you to rot in exile. But you know the galaxy better than anyone, and I think you'd rather see it thrive under new leadership than descend into chaos." Jarrus's eyes gleamed with interest. "You make an intriguing point, Princess." For a long moment, the room was silent. Then, slowly, Jarrus rose from his chair and walked toward them, his gaze shifting between Blake and Zevra. "There is indeed a coalition forming," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "A shadow alliance made up of disgruntled factions from across the galaxy. Some are members of the Council itself. Others are warlords, crime syndicates, and old enemies of the Arcarian Empire. They'd been waiting for the right moment to strike, and your marriage has given them the excuse they needed." Blake's jaw tightened. "Who leads them?" Jarrus paused, his eyes narrowing. "There are many players, but the one you need to worry about is someone very close to you, Princess." Zevra's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" Jarrus's lips curled into a faint smile. "Princess Lyra." The words hit Zevra like a physical blow. Blake's eyes widened in disbelief. "Lyra? Zevra's sister?" Jarrus nodded. "Yes, the perfect traitor. Beautiful, admired, and utterly ruthless. She's been working behind the scenes for years, gathering allies, and manipulating events to position herself as the galaxy's next ruler. Your marriage, Blake, threatens her plans, and she will stop at nothing to destroy you both." Zevra's mind spun, a whirlwind of emotions threatening to overtake her. Lyra, the sister who had always mocked and belittled her, was now plotting her downfall. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Blake's voice was grim. "Then we have no time to waste." Jarrus smiled darkly. "Indeed. If you want to stop her, you'll need to act quickly. But be warned, Lyra is more dangerous than you realize. She has powerful allies, and she's not afraid to play dirty." Zevra straightened, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll play dirtier." Blake exchanged a glance with her, his admiration for her growing even in the face of this revelation. Together, they would face this new threat, whatever it took. Jarrus watched them with a knowing smile, the wheels of his own plans turning. He had given them what they needed, but in the galaxy's game of power, no move was ever made without a hidden motive. And as Blake and Zevra left the bunker, prepared to confront the treachery lurking within their own family, the storm that had been brewing on the horizon finally began to break. As Blake and Zevra returned to the freighter, the weight of Jarrus's revelation pressed heavily on them. Lyra, Zevra's own sister, orchestrating an insurrection that could tear the galaxy apart. It was almost too much to comprehend. But they couldn't afford to hesitate. If Lyra was leading the rebellion, they had to act swiftly, before she consolidated her power further. The freighter hummed to life, its engines engaging as they prepared to leave Rithis Prime. The crew, sensing the gravity of the situation, worked in silence. Blake sat beside Zevra in the cockpit, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. He could feel the tension radiating from her, the conflict within her as she wrestled with the knowledge of her sister's betrayal. "Are you all right?" Blake asked softly, breaking the silence. Zevra didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the star-streaked void outside the viewport, her mind a tumult of emotions. Anger, disbelief, sorrow, all swirled within her, warring for dominance. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and controlled. "I should have seen it," she said bitterly. "All those years, Lyra looked down on me, mocked me for being the ugly sister, the one no one wanted. I thought her cruelty was born of vanity, but it was more than that. She was planning this from the start." Blake reached for her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You couldn't have known. Lyra hid her true intentions from everyone. But now we know, and we have a chance to stop her." Zevra turned to him, her eyes dark and resolute. "She won't stop until she gets what she wants. And if I have to stop her myself, I will." Blake could hear the resolve in her voice, but he also sensed the pain she was holding back. Zevra had always lived in Lyra's shadow, but now she was being forced to confront her sister not just as a rival, but as an enemy. He knew how deeply this betrayal cut, even if she refused to show it. Before Blake could respond, a sudden jolt rocked the freighter. The alarms blared, and the ship lurched to one side, sending both of them flying forward. The crew scrambled, shouting over the blaring warning signals. "What's happening?" Blake demanded as he and Zevra pulled themselves upright. The pilot turned, his face pale. "We're under attack. A squadron of Arcarian warships just appeared on our scanners. They're blocking our escape route." Blake's heart sank. It was too soon. Lyra had acted faster than they'd anticipated. Zevra's eyes narrowed. "She knows we're here." The comm crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the cockpit, smooth and cold. "Commander Blake, Princess Zevra, I had a feeling I'd find you here." It was Lyra. Blake's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively reaching for the comm. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady despite the situation. "I didn't think you'd reveal yourself so soon." A cold laugh echoed through the speakers. "Why not? There's no need for subtlety anymore. You see, dear sister, I have everything I need. The Council, the nobles, even some of the Outer Rim factions, they all support me. Your little marriage alliance means nothing." Zevra stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "You've betrayed our people, Lyra. Do you really think the galaxy will rally behind you?" "I don't care what the galaxy thinks," Lyra replied smoothly. "This is about power, Zevra, something you've never understood. You can hide behind noble ideals all you want. But in the end, power is what matters. And I have it." Blake shot a glance at Zevra, who was visibly seething with anger. But before she could respond, the ship was rocked again, the freighter's shields flaring as enemy fire slammed into them. "We can't hold out much longer," one of the crew members shouted. Blake made a snap decision. "Set course for the Sarnath Nebula. It's dense enough to hide us." The pilot hesitated, but Zevra's sharp command left no room for doubt. "Do it." The freighter veered off course, its engines straining as it accelerated toward the swirling mass of the nebula. Outside, the Arcarian warships pursued, their sleek, crystalline forms cutting through the void like blades. Lyra's voice returned, filled with mocking confidence. "Running, Blake. I expected more from the great diplomat of Earth, but no matter. I'll find you. And when I do, not even Zevra's title will save her." The comm cut off abruptly, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Zevra clenched her fists, her eyes blazing with fury. Blake could feel the tension rolling off her in waves. "She's not going to stop, Blake," Zevra said through gritted teeth. "She won't stop until she destroys everything and everyone we care about." Blake nodded grimly. "We need to regroup. Find allies we can trust. There's no way we can fight her on our own." Zevra's gaze hardened. "We'll fight her, Blake, but not on her terms." As the freighter plunged into the nebula, its sensors scrambled by the thick clouds of ionized gas, Blake and Zevra knew they were entering a new phase of their battle. Lyra had made her move, and now the war for the galaxy's future had truly begun. But in the swirling chaos of the nebula, with danger lurking at every turn, one thing was certain. Blake and Zevra were ready to confront Lyra, ready to face the treachery within their own family, and ready to stop the shadow war that threatened to consume the stars themselves. The path ahead was perilous, but together they would find a way through the storm. The freighter drifted silently through the dense ionized clouds of the Sarnath Nebula, its hull crackling with static from the swirling gases outside. The galaxy beyond was veiled by the glowing mist, and within its confines, the ship was a ghost, unseen, unheard, lost in the chaos of the nebula's energy storms. Blake sat in the dimly lit war room, his thoughts heavy as he plotted their next move. Across the table, Zevra studied a holo-projection of the galaxy, her dark eyes narrowed with focus. The weight of Lyra's betrayal hung over them like a storm cloud, but Blake knew they couldn't afford to dwell on it. They needed allies, powerful ones. With Lyra rallying a faction within the Arcarian Empire, they were outnumbered and outgunned. Zevra broke the silence first, her voice measured but laced with determination. "We need to contact the Varians." Blake looked up, surprised. The Varians. They've been neutral for centuries. Why would they get involved in this? Zevra's gaze met his, steady and resolute. They've stayed out of galactic politics because they've had no reason to intervene. But Lyra's rebellion isn't just about Arcarian power. She's aiming to destabilize the entire interstellar order. The Varians value balance, and if Lyra wins, the galaxy will fall into chaos. That's reason enough. Blake leaned back, considering her words. The Varians were an enigmatic species, their civilization older than most star systems. They were known for their unparalleled technology and strict adherence to neutrality in all conflicts. If anyone could tip the scales against Lyra, it was them. But convincing them to act was another matter entirely. "I don't disagree," Blake said carefully. "But the Varians are notoriously difficult to reach, let alone persuade. We'd need a solid reason. Something that proves Lyra's actions are a threat to them." Zevra gave a small, grim smile. "That's where we're in luck. My mother, before she passed, forged a secret alliance with the Varians, a precaution in case the Arcarian Empire ever fell into turmoil. The Varians owe us a favor." Blake's brow furrowed. "And you're sure they'll honor that?" Zevra stood, her expression unyielding. "They will. But we have to get to them first, before Lyra makes her next move." Before Blake could respond, a knock came at the door. It was one of the crew members, their face pale and urgent. "Commander, Princess," the crew member said breathlessly. "We've detected a vessel trailing us through the nebula. It's stealth class, Arcarian design." Blake exchanged a sharp glance with Zevra. "Lyra?" Zevra shook her head, her eyes narrowing in thought. "No, if it was Lyra, she would have attacked by now. She wouldn't waste time trailing us." Blake rose, his mind racing. "Whoever it is, they found us. We need to know if they're friend or foe." The two of them hurried to the cockpit, where the freighter's crew worked frantically to analyze the approaching ship. The sensors were patchy, scrambled by the nebula's interference, but the faint outline of the stealth vessel was unmistakable on the radar. "Open a channel," Blake ordered, his voice steady despite the tension. "Let's see who we're dealing with." The comm crackled to life, and after a moment of static, a voice came through, smooth, confident, and surprisingly familiar. "Commander Blake, Princess Zevra. I've been looking for you." Blake's eyes widened in recognition. "Captain Callus." The voice on the other end laughed softly. "The very same. I take it you didn't expect to see me here." Blake exhaled slowly. Captain Callus was a former Arcarian military officer, one of the few who had grown disillusioned with the Empire's growing thirst for power. He'd gone rogue years ago, forming a covert resistance against imperial tyranny, though his presence in the galaxy was more rumor than fact. Blake had heard of him, but never expected their paths to cross. "What do you want, Callus?" Zevra asked, her tone guarded. "I could ask the same of you, Princess," Callus replied smoothly. "But let's cut to the chase. Lyra's rebellion is no secret, and it's spreading faster than anyone anticipated. I have people within her inner circle, and trust me, the galaxy is about to go to war. You two, however, are a threat to her plans. That's why I'm here, to offer an alliance." Blake and Zevra exchanged a look. It was an unexpected offer, but one they couldn't dismiss outright. "What's your angle?" Blake asked, his tone wary. "Why align with us?" Callus's voice grew serious. "Because I don't want to see the galaxy torn apart by Lyra's ambitions any more than you do. She'll destabilize everything. I've fought for too long to see the balance shattered by another imperialist power grab." There was a long pause as Blake weighed the offer. He could feel Zevra's gaze on him, waiting for his decision. Trusting Callus was a gamble, but in their current position, they needed all the help they could get. "We accept your offer," Blake said at last, his voice firm. "But we'll need proof you can deliver on your promises." Callus chuckled softly. "I expected nothing less. We'll meet in person to discuss the details. Sending you coordinates now. Be ready." The transmission cut off, and the crew quickly confirmed the coordinates sent to them, an asteroid base hidden deep within the nebula. Zevra crossed her arms, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you trust him?" Blake shook his head slightly. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford right now. But if Callus is telling the truth, his network could be the key to outmaneuvering Lyra." Zevra nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "Then let's hope he's on our side. Because if Lyra is as close to victory as he says, we don't have much time." As the freighter adjusted course toward the hidden base, Blake felt the weight of the galaxy's future pressing down on him. The war was coming, faster than they had anticipated. And with every new ally, every new revelation, the stakes grew higher. But one thing was clear: they couldn't fight this battle alone. And if they had any hope of stopping Lyra, they needed all the help they could get, no matter how dangerous the alliances might be. The freighter vanished deeper into the nebula, disappearing from view as they raced toward their next confrontation, unaware of the shadows gathering in the depths of the galaxy. The freighter glided through the treacherous currents of the nebula, its destination the hidden asteroid base where Captain Callus waited. Blake felt a creeping sense of unease, but he couldn't afford to let doubt slow them down now. Every second lost was another moment closer to Lyra consolidating her power and the galaxy tipping into war. As they approached the coordinates, the base emerged from the swirling mists. Jagged mass of rock, barely visible against the nebula's glowing tendrils. A series of concealed docking bays opened to receive them, and soon the ship settled into the safety of the base's cavernous interior. Blake and Zevra disembarked, greeted by a contingent of heavily armed soldiers. At their helm stood Captain Callus, a tall, dark-haired man with piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was dressed in a sleek combat uniform, his demeanor calm and calculating. "Welcome," Callus said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge of danger. "I trust the journey wasn't too treacherous." Blake crossed his arms, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. "Let's get to the point. You claim to have intel on Lyra's plans. We're here to see if you can deliver." Callus smirked, clearly enjoying Blake's direct approach. "Always straight to business, Commander." "I respect that. Follow me." They were led deeper into the base, passing through corridors filled with bustling resistance members. It was clear that Callus had built an impressive operation, though its full scale remained hidden. In a briefing room, Callus activated a holomap of the galaxy, its star systems flickering with data points and troop movements. "As I said, Lyra's rebellion is spreading faster than anyone anticipated," Callus began, pointing to the map. "She's already secured the allegiance of several key Arcarian fleets, and her forces are moving to destabilize not just the Empire, but the surrounding systems. She's positioning herself as the savior of a new order, one where the Arcarians dominate through force." Zevra's face darkened, her hands clenched at her sides. "What's her next move?" Callus zoomed in on a sector near the galactic core. She's planning a strike on the Galactic High Council's capital. If she succeeds, she'll cripple the central governing body and plunge the galaxy into chaos. Her forces are gathering here. He pointed to a nearby system, but she's keeping their full strength hidden until the moment of attack. Blake's mind raced. We need to warn the Council. Fortify the capital before she can launch this assault. Callus nodded, but his expression remained grim. It won't be easy. She has spies everywhere, including within the Council itself. Any move we make will be countered unless we can outmaneuver her. Zevra stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. We'll need to make a show of force. If we can rally enough of the neutral star systems to our side, we can create a blockade before she reaches the capital. Blake turned to Callus. And your network? How much support can you provide? Callus's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. Enough to make a difference. But before we proceed, I need to know something. He looked directly at Zevra, his tone sharpening. You've been in the shadows of the Arcarian court for years, Princess. Why should my people follow you now? Blake tensed, ready to defend Zevra, but she raised a hand to stop him. She met Callus's gaze without flinching. Because I know the truth about my sister. I know the depths of her ambition, and I know what she's willing to sacrifice to achieve it. But more than that, I understand the galaxy's needs better than she ever will. If you follow her, you'll get tyranny. If you follow me, you'll get balance. It's that simple. There was a long silence as Callus studied her, the tension thick in the air. Then, slowly, he nodded. Very well, he said. We'll follow your lead. But know this, if you fail, the galaxy will burn, and none of us will be able to stop it. The days that followed were a blur of frantic preparation. Blake and Zevra worked tirelessly to coordinate with their scattered allies, rallying systems that had remained neutral for too long. Messages were sent in secret, and fleets were mobilized to intercept Lyra's forces before they could reach the capital. The final confrontation loomed on the horizon. As their makeshift fleet gathered near the core systems, Blake stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the stars streak past. Zevra joined him, her presence a calm in the storm that brewed all around them. Do you think we have enough? She asked quietly, her eyes scanning the vastness of space. Blake didn't answer immediately. He'd seen enough battles to know that numbers weren't always the deciding factor. But as he looked at Zevra, he felt the weight of all they had fought for, their lives, their worlds, and the fragile hope they carried. We have to, he said at last. There's no turning back now. The sensors blinked to life, detecting the approach of Lyra's fleet. It was massive, larger than they had anticipated, and bristling with advanced warships. All ships, prepare for combat, Blake ordered, his voice steady despite the odds. We hold the line here. We can't let them through. The battle began in a blinding flash of energy weapons and shields. The two fleets clashed in the cold vacuum of space, the blackness illuminated by the fire of war. Blake's forces were outnumbered, but their strategic positioning and coordination gave them an edge. Zevra's understanding of Arcarian tactics proved invaluable as they countered Lyra's every move. But Lyra's flagship loomed in the distance, and Blake knew that this battle would not end until they faced her directly. Take us in, Blake ordered, his voice grim. We need to finish this. As their ship closed the distance to Lyra's command vessel, Blake felt the weight of the moment bearing down on him. This was it, the final confrontation. Everything they had sacrificed, every choice they had made, had led them to this point. They breached Lyra's ship in a storm of fire and steel, Blake and Zevra leading the charge. The corridors of the flagship were a labyrinth of Arcarian design, but Zevra knew them well. They fought their way through Lyra's guards, the echoes of battle ringing in their ears. At last, they reached the throne room, the heart of the ship. Lyra stood at its center, her crystalline beauty untouched by the chaos around her. She regarded them with cold amusement. So, you've come to challenge me, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I should have expected as much. This ends now, Lyra, Zevra said, her voice steady. "The galaxy doesn't need a tyrant." Lyra's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Blake saw a flicker of something other than arrogance. Fear. "You're a fool, Zevra," Lyra spat. "You could have had everything. You could have ruled beside me." Blake stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "It's over, Lyra. You've lost." Lyra's face twisted with rage, and she raised her hand, summoning a surge of energy from the ship's core. But before she could strike, Zevra moved with lightning speed, disarming her sister with a precision born of years in the shadows. The two sisters faced each other in silence, the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. "You were always stronger than me," Zevra said softly. "But you never understood what real power is." With that, she deactivated Lyra's weapon and cast it aside. Lyra fell to her knees, her arrogance shattered. The rebellion had failed, and the galaxy was spared the war that would have consumed it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of rebuilding and reconciliation. With Lyra's defeat, the Arcarian Empire began to heal, and peace was restored to the galaxy. The Galactic High Council, once fractured, now stood united in the face of the challenges ahead. Blake and Zevra stood side by side as the new era dawned, their bond stronger than ever. They had defied the odds, shattered traditions, and forged a future built on trust and understanding. And as they looked out at the stars, they knew that their journey was only beginning. Together, they would guide the galaxy into a new age, one where true strength came not from power, but from unity.